I used to wake up every morning in a penthouse that overlooked the city like I owned the sky itself. Marble floors gleamed beneath my feet, and the scent of fresh roses filled rooms I barely noticed anymore. I had cars most people would dream of, a wardrobe that could rival any boutique, and a bank account that made friends bow and enemies envy. People called me a self-made billionaire, a man who had built an empire from nothing, and for a while, I believed it. I believed in the power I held, in the respect that followed me like a shadow, in the illusion that nothing could touch me. But the cracks were there long before I saw them. Family gatherings felt strained, smiles forced, compliments empty. My so-called allies at work whisper behind doors, shared knowing glances that I thought were just paranoia. And then came the day I realized how fragile everything truly was. A single decision, a move I thought was brilliant, turned out to be catastrophic. And as the stock prices plummeted and lawsuits mounted, the people I trusted the most revealed themselves. Friends vanished, partners distanced themselves, and even my family hesitated before offering any support. I was rich, respected, and suddenly, I was nothing. The office that once buzzed with activity felt hollow, like a tomb for my ambitions. The accounts I had proudly built, the contracts I had signed with confidence, all evaporated in a storm of betrayal and mismanagement I hadn't even foreseen. Calls from bankers and creditors pierced the calm I had always taken for granted, and the weight of disbelief settled on my chest. How could it all disappear in a heartbeat? Every handshake, every smile, every promise I had taken at face value now felt like a dagger in my back. I walked through my empty mansion that night, the walls echoing with memories of laughter, deals, and celebrations. The chandelier above the dining table seemed to mock me, its crystal reflecting a life I could no longer claim. The art, the trophies, the awards, they all reminded me of who I had been and who I was no longer. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and exposed in a way I had never experienced before. And in the midst of my despair, I noticed her quietly dusting the corners of my study, unaware of the storm that had just shattered my world. Somehow, in her calm, there was a spark of clarity I couldn't yet name. I didn't know then that this woman, the one I had overlooked for years, would become the single most important ally in my comeback. But that night, as I sank into a chair and stared at the city lights through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I realized that nothing about my life would ever be the same. I had lost everything, and the man I had been was gone. The days after my fortune disappeared were worse than the night it all collapsed. I woke up to silence, the kind that presses on your chest and makes even breathing feel heavy. Friends I had shared champagne with, celebrated deals with, and trusted with my secrets were gone. Some blocked my calls. Others offered hollow apologies before disappearing altogether. My so-called allies in business, the ones I had counted on for decades, now treated me like a stranger, their eyes averted, their words cautious and empty. Each lost contact felt like a new wound, a reminder that loyalty had been an illusion. Family, too, had retreated. The people who once smiled at my success, who bragged about knowing me at parties, suddenly seemed distant. Birthday invitations stopped. Phone calls became rare. And when I did see them, their eyes carried a judgment I couldn't escape. It was as if my misfortune made me contagious, and everyone I loved decided it was safer to step away. My mother's voice trembled when she said, "Maybe you need some time." And my father barely looked me in the eye. Loneliness wrapped around me like a suffocating shroud, heavier with each passing hour. Creditors called relentlessly. The shrill ring of the phone became a soundtrack to my humiliation. Threatening letters, aggressive emails, and unexpected visits reminded me that the world I once dominated now saw me as prey. Every call, every demand, every polite but pointed question about repayment reminded me of the fragility of trust and the fleeting nature of power. I had thought money was security, but it was nothing compared to loyalty. And then the thought hit me, sharp and cold. This wasn't just bad luck. It wasn't a misstep or a series of unfortunate events. Someone had orchestrated this. someone I had trusted implicitly. The puzzle pieces of whispered conversations, oddly timed setbacks, and suspiciously timed rumors clicked together in a way that left me trembling. Betrayal wasn't random, it was calculated, and the person or people behind it knew exactly how to dismantle everything I had built. My stomach dropped, a mix of fear and rage rising simultaneously. I sat alone in the apartment that now felt like a cage, the weight of realization pressing down. This wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of uncovering who had orchestrated my fall from grace. And once I found out, no one would forget it. Boxes lined the marble floors, half-packed and haphazard, filled with items that once defined my life. Each object felt heavier than it should, weighted with memories I no longer wanted to face, but couldn't ignore. Portraits of celebrations, trophies, and awards stared back at me from every corner, silent witnesses to a life I had lost. I traced my fingers along the polished surfaces, remembering laughter that now felt hollow, toasts made to deals that had crumpled, and promises from friends who had vanished without a trace. Every step through the empty halls carried a pang of betrayal, a reminder that the people I had trusted most were gone. Outside the window, I caught glimpses of former friends and associates laughing at rooftop bars, toasting to victories I was no longer part of. Their lives moved forward effortlessly while mine had ground to a painful halt. Social media updates flashed across my phone, events I wasn't invited to, gatherings I was conveniently absent from, achievements celebrated without me. A gnawing sense of FOMO gripped me, sharper than any financial loss, reminding me how quickly admiration and inclusion could vanish. As I sealed the last box, a deep emptiness settled in. The mansion that had once symbolized power and success now felt like a mausoleum of mistakes and betrayals. I paused in the grand foyer, looking at the chandelier that had seen countless parties, the walls that had echoed with applause, and the carpets that had felt the steps of so many false friends. And then I saw her, the cleaning lady, quietly gathering supplies, humming softly, oblivious to the chaos around her. In that instant, clarity cut through the despair. I looked around, realizing the only person left was her. She moved through the empty mansion with a grace I had never noticed before, sweeping, dusting, and organizing with quiet precision. Most people overlooked her, assumed she was just another employee going through the motions, but I had never truly looked. That morning, as I slumped against the kitchen counter, feeling smaller than I had ever felt, she glanced at me with a knowing look and said, "You know, they didn't think this far ahead, but neither did you." Her words caught me off guard. I frowned, unsure if she was mocking me or offering insight. "What do you mean?" I asked, curiosity and skepticism battling in my chest. "They left gaps," she said, picking up a notebook I hadn't even seen. "They think they covered every angle, but they didn't. There are opportunities where they thought there were none. You just need to see them." Her casual tone had an intensity that made me sit up straighter. There was a confidence in her eyes, the kind you only see in people who quietly understand the game before it even begins. As she explained, I realized she had been observing my family, my associates, even my rivals in ways I never had. She noticed patterns, weaknesses, and timing that I had overlooked. Simply because I had been blinded by my wealth and ego, I listened, captivated as she detailed small inconsistencies, subtle missteps, and overlooked alliances. The more she spoke, the more a spark of hope flickered inside me. This wasn't just housekeeping. This was strategy, insight, and perhaps even genius, delivered casually over the scent of lemon cleaner and polished wood. I realized then that she might be the one person capable of helping me navigate the mess I had been left in. I sank into the leather chair by the window, staring at the city that once seemed like my kingdom. Every instinct told me to surrender, to accept the humiliation, and let the world move on without me. I could retreat, disappear quietly, and avoid further embarrassment. Part of me longed for that simplicity, the relief of letting go, but another part burned with a stubborn refusal to be nothing. I had built my life from nothing once before. Could I really let it slip away again? Her words from earlier echoed in my mind, sharper now. They left gaps. You just need to see them. I replayed her observations over and over, tracing her logic, testing the possibilities. Suddenly, what had seemed like hopeless chaos began to form into a pattern. Small errors, overlooked opportunities, weaknesses in the people who had pushed me down, all of it mapped out a path that could restore me. If I dared, I turned to her, hesitant but desperate. What exactly are you suggesting? I asked. A faint smile tugged at her lips. You've been too careful, too obvious. There's a move no one expects. It's bold, risky, but it could put you back on top, faster than you think. Her calm conviction ignited something in me I hadn't felt in months. The underdog, someone I had never considered a strategist, was offering a path to power. And for the first time since everything fell apart, I felt a surge of possibility. The plan was audacious, dangerous, and exhilarating. I realized that my chance to reclaim control wouldn't come from playing it safe, it would come from listening to the one person the world had ignored. Power surged through me. This wasn't just a strategy. It was my first move in turning the tables. And it was only the beginning. We started small, almost imperceptibly, like shadows moving in a room no one was paying attention to. I followed her guidance, taking back minor assets I had overlooked, accounts I thought were lost, and contacts I had assumed were gone forever. Every action was precise, calculated, and deliberate. There was no flash, no grand announcement, just the subtle reclamation of control that went unnoticed by most. But not all. She showed me how to leverage secrets I had long ignored, details about former partners' weaknesses, hidden rivalries, and the petty betrayals they themselves had committed. Each revelation became a tool, a way to sow confusion among the people who had once thought themselves untouchable. Watching their plans unravel quietly was exhilarating, a slow burn of satisfaction that sharpened my resolve. With every small victory, my confidence grew. I moved with a new awareness, seeing patterns and opportunities I had missed in my arrogance. My instincts, once stilled by wealth and privilege, were now honed to precision. And through it all, she guided me, calm and unwavering, her eyes always 3 steps ahead of mine. Then, the first hint that we were being noticed. A rival, one of the key antagonists, paused mid-conversation, their expression changing from smug certainty to something tighter, wary. They had realized perhaps too late that the tide was shifting, and in that moment, a thrill coursed through me, tempered by the knowledge that the real game was only beginning. The invitation arrived like a dagger wrapped in gold, a gala celebrating deals I had once led. Now occurring without me, I knew they expected me to be absent, to stay home, broken and defeated. But curiosity and something deeper, a stubborn refusal to disappear, quietly pulled me in. The moment I walked in, I felt their eyes. Old allies and so-called friends sizing me up with thinly veiled smirks. Whispers followed me like shadows, each syllable dripping with the satisfaction of my supposed downfall. They made jokes about my bankruptcy, laughed at the deals I had lost, and spoke of my empire as a cautionary tale. Every laugh was a blow, every glance a reminder of how alone I had felt. And yet, I noticed something I hadn't before. I no longer felt helpless or humiliated. I had grown. The fear that once dictated my every move had faded, replaced with a keen awareness of their underestimation. I saw their envy and arrogance as weakness, a vulnerability I could exploit later. I moved through the room observing, not reacting. Their FOMO and status obsession became clear. I was invisible only because they wanted me to be, confident that my story was over. They all thought I was finished, and that belief was going to be my weapon. We began to act with precision, each move designed to expose cracks in the armor of those who had once looked down on me. Guided by her insight, I approached situations differently, calculated, confident, and unseen until it was too late. I reached out to contacts I had neglected, leveraged alliances quietly, and sowed just enough doubt and misinformation to make my former enemies second-guess themselves. The shift was subtle at first, almost imperceptible. But the ripples were undeniable. Then came the moment of revelation. One of my loudest critics, someone who had openly mocked my downfall at the gala, made a careless misstep. I had documented their dealings months before, kept records of their lies and manipulations. With the cleaning lady's guidance, I ensured those details reached the right people at the right time. The effect was immediate. Gossip spread, whispers grew, and within hours, the antagonist's reputation began to crumble. Watching their composure crack, the confidence that once seemed untouchable shatter in real time sent a rush through me. Status tension escalated. Colleagues and competitors alike began to see the shift. I was no longer the powerless man they thought they could ignore. The first explosive reversal was complete, and it tasted sweeter than I had imagined. For the first time since my fall, I felt the power returning, and I knew this was only the beginning. I sat at the edge of my modest apartment, staring at the dwindling funds I had left, feeling the weight of every dollar like a countdown to failure. Every plan we had executed so far had been careful, precise, small enough to recover. It failed. But this next move, this was different. I had to commit everything, my remaining money, my credibility, my last shred of reputation on a single, audacious gamble. The thought of losing it all again made my chest tighten, a familiar panic creeping in like an unwelcome guest. She leaned against the counter, arms crossed, watching me with a quiet intensity. "This is it," she said calmly. "I've seen the patterns, the timing, the weaknesses. You're ready. If you hesitate, it fails before it begins." I shook my head. What if it doesn't work? I've got almost nothing left. One wrong move and she stepped closer, placing a hand on mine. And one bold move, and you reclaim everything. Fear is exactly what they want. Don't give it to them. Her confidence was infectious, and slowly, my resolve solidified. I took a deep breath, envisioning the stakes, the potential humiliation, and the triumph that awaited. My mind raced through every scenario, weighing risk and reward, the tension piling tighter with each passing moment. And yet, despite the fear, there was a thrill I hadn't felt in months. The possibility of rewriting my story entirely. I signed the agreements, made the calls, executed the steps exactly as we had planned, and then I waited. The world was silent, watching. And I realized that nothing mattered except whether this gamble would succeed or leave me completely stripped bare. The day all turnaround began like any other, but the air carried attention I couldn't ignore. By mid-morning, I began receiving messages, confirmations, and notifications I hadn't dared hope for. The investment, the intricate maneuvers, the subtle manipulations, they were all paying off. Funds I thought were gone forever flooded back into my accounts, restoring not just wealth, but influence, power, and credibility. Emails from former partners who had mocked me now asked for meetings. Even the board members who had doubted me reconsidered their positions. The tables had turned, and everyone realized it simultaneously. I walked toward the front of my building and saw the first symbol of victory, a sleek black helicopter descending onto the rooftop. Exactly as planned, signaling the arrival of new partners and opportunities. My office, once stripped of everything, had been restored, every detail meticulously replaced. Every desk, every chair, every award back in its place. My car, long sold to cover debts, gleamed in the sunlight, a reminder that I had returned not only financially but fully. With style intact, watching the scramble unfold among my former enemies was intoxicating. Whispers of disbelief, hastily arranged calls, and frantic meetings echoed the chaos they had once caused me. The karma I had envisioned was unfolding perfectly. Every slight, every betrayal, every insult was being quietly but undeniably replicated back to them. I leaned back in my chair, savoring the moment, the culmination of months of careful planning, observation, and courage. They never saw it coming, and as I looked out over the city, I felt a surge of vindication and relief, knowing that I had not only regain what was lost, but had done so in a way that honored both my intellect and resilience. The boardroom was packed, a sea of familiar faces who had once dismissed me as finished. My former allies shifted uncomfortably in their seats, unsure whether to speak, retreat, or pretend this gathering was routine. I stood at the head of the table, calm, measured, the air around me charged with quiet authority. The cleaning lady had orchestrated every detail, the evidence, the revelations, the timing all laid bare for maximum impact. I began, recounting events with precision. Do you remember the contracts you tried to hide from me? The promises you broke? My voice was steady, but each word carried weight, forcing them to confront the choices that had led to this moment. Gasps, stutters, and strained laughter punctuated the room as I revealed facts no one could deny. One by one, apologies spilled out, forced and humiliating. I didn't realize. I thought you were done. I miscalculated. Their arrogance had crumbled, replaced by the sharp sting of exposure. Old friends, rivals, and family members all reeled as they recognized that their schemes, manipulations, and betrayals were now public knowledge, undeniable and embarrassing. I let silence settle for a beat, letting them absorb the consequences. Then I added, and yet, here I am, nothing lost, everything regained. Perhaps now you'll think twice before underestimating anyone. The room was still. The weight of justice, of karma delivered, filled the space, leaving my detractors humbled and me finally vindicated. Sitting alone in my restored office, I let the quiet settle around me, the hum of the city below a reminder that life moved forward whether I stumbled or soared. I reflected on the journey, the betrayals, the painstaking climb back. I realized how easily I had been blinded by pride, how much I had underestimated loyalty and the quiet strength of those I overlooked. Gratitude welled up for the few who had stood by me, particularly the woman whose insight and courage had been the catalyst for everything. Without her, I would still be lost in despair. Humility came next, a lesson carved deeply into my soul. Power, I understood now, was not about wealth alone, but about awareness, patience, and understanding the hidden currents beneath every interaction. Trust, once given to freely, had become deliberate, measured, yet not cynical. I had learned to value sincerity over flattery, foresight over impulse, and courage over convenience. I smiled softly, recognizing my growth. The man who had walked into ruin months ago was gone, replaced by someone stronger, wiser, and quietly fulfilled. I had reclaimed more than my fortune. I had reclaimed myself, and the clarity that came with it was far more rewarding than any material triumph. She never asked for recognition. Through it all, she moved quietly, observing, guiding, and supporting without expectation. But now, in front of everyone who had doubted us both, I made sure she received her due. I handed her a key to a new position, authority she had earned, and a gift that symbolized both respect and gratitude. Her eyes widened, a mix of disbelief and pride, and for the first time, the room truly saw her. People whispered, surprised that the quiet cleaning lady had been the linchpin in my comeback. They realized that brilliance and courage are often hidden in plain sight, unassuming but powerful. She had saved me, elevated me, and done so without seeking glory. And now the world could no longer ignore her. I watched her accept the recognition with grace, knowing that her loyalty, intelligence, and kindness had rewritten not just my story, but her own. The heroism of the overlooked ally was finally undeniable. As I stood on the balcony of my penthouse once more, looking over the city that had both crushed and welcomed me back, I felt a profound sense of completion. The man who had lost everything, stripped of fortune, friends, and certainty, was gone. In his place stood someone tempered by betrayal, sharpened by strategy, and strengthened by the loyalty of those few who truly mattered. Every setback, every slight, every whispered doubt had shaped me, teaching lessons I could never use in LEARN. Yet, even in triumph, caution lingered. Not everyone could be trusted. Not every ally was what they seemed, And not every smile hid goodwill. The world was full of mirrors reflecting both opportunity and deception, and I had learned to see the difference clearly. I moved forward with gratitude, awareness, and a quiet confidence that came not from wealth alone, but from experience and resilience. I smiled, thinking of the journey from despair to victory, from invisibility to recognition, and from uncertainty to control. It had been brutal, humbling, and exhilarating, but in the end, I had emerged not just restored, but transformed. The story was mine, the lessons were indelible, and the closure, though bittersweet, was complete.